Yes, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us today. So, I suppose the first thing to do is probably to introduce ourselves in case you haven't met us in real life or virtually. My name is Andrew Sinclair. I'm the Business Development Manager for Total Water Solutions, and joining me today is Michael Dean, and I'll let Michael introduce himself.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Yeah, so Michael Dean, the Water Systems Manager at Northumbrian Water. So I've been, 20 years this next month. So quite a while, but been in post since 2013, and specifically with regards to Legionella control. But previous to that, I managed the water regulations department. So yeah, hopefully plenty of experience which should be able to help you out today.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the other thing to probably just slightly mention as well, just because some people don't necessarily know the difference of where we sit as a business. So we are Total Water Solutions, but we're actually a part of Northumbrian Water. So Northumbrian Water operates in the northeast as Northumbrian Water, and in the southeast as Essex and Suffolk Water. So we're the commercial team effectively for Northumbrian Water. So that's where we come into it, and we obviously go by Total Water Solutions. So I suppose getting straight sort of into the topic, Michael, around basics, it's kind of like, what is Legionella? That's the basic question we get asked.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a common question, so I will get straight into it. So the bacteria itself, yeah, it's not what we call a rare bacteria. It's pretty much ubiquitous. You get it pretty much everywhere. It's quite interesting that the guidelines talk about the control of Legionella bacteria. They don't talk about the eradication of bacteria. So I think the idea is there's so many parallels here with COVID, but I think it's a case of we've got to live with the bacteria. But the idea is that we don't let the conditions within the water systems become to a state where the bacteria get to become a high number within the water systems, which can cause a problem. So the idea is, yes, you're always going to get it. The water companies supply it free of charge at low levels, but the idea is that we as kind of custodians of water systems manage them so we don't let the bacteria become to a high level to become a problem. Okay, so bacteria, it's not a virus, it's a bacteria pretty much everywhere. You'll get it in a wide variety of natural environments. You actually get it in soil, get it in peat, you get it in water courses. Right outside my door there, I've got a water butt. Recent surveys have shown that over 90% of water butts are pretty much really high counts of Legionella bacteria, simply because if it's anything like mine, it's got no lid on it, so you're going to get sunlight on there warming it up. You're going to get algae growing on the inside of the water butt. You're going to get all sorts of rubbish going off the garage roof from the birds and the seagulls and the moss and the rest of it, which is a nutrient source. And you get a bit of warmth, a bit of sunlight. The bacteria absolutely love it, warm water. So yeah, they'll grow to high levels in there. It's not to say that water butts are bad. The idea is that to catch the illness, you actually need an aerosol. So you need to be able to splash water around and create an aerosol, fine water vapor, and that's where the bacteria will kind of spread. Okay, so the vector is the water vapor. But if you go back to the bacteria itself, yeah, pretty much everywhere. So it will grow to high levels given the right environment. So the right environment is temperature. So they like it, they grow really well between 20 to 45 degrees. That's what we call the danger zone. Not just a Top Gun song. So between 20 to 45, and that's for obvious reasons, that's body temperature. So these bacteria have grown and evolved to live inside of you. Okay, so yeah, so the idea is the mantra, we'll talk about this quite at some great length, is the mantra: keep it hot, keep it cold, keep it moving. So basically the idea is if you keep your water system hot or cold, bacteria will not grow. Bacteria will love to grow anywhere between 20 to 45 degrees. So need a nutrient source. So that could be anything like I've just discussed. It could be a storage tank with no lid on it. So you can get all sorts of rubbish falling out of your loft into your storage tank. That'll be a nutrient source. Organics in the water system. So it could be Boss White and hemp, all these illegal or unlawful kind of jointed compounds. They're a good source of bacteria. Scale sediment, you've all seen a Domestos advert with all stalactites and stalagmites. They love that sort of environment to grow in. So yeah, so the idea is, like you say, keep the nutrient sources away, get the temperatures in the correct environment, as in hot's hot and cold's cold. And like you say, and the idea is we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. But if you keep the water flowing, then you basically you decline the bacteria, or deny the bacteria the time to grow. Okay, so they all need time to grow. It's not particularly fast-growing bacteria actually. We do get quite a lot of questions asked when we submit our samples to the laboratory. Take up to 14 days to get the results back. So it's not a particularly fast-growing bacteria, but like you say, given the right environment, they will grow to quite nasty and high levels. The illness, legionellosis, so that's basically, it's an inhalation of the bacteria. So if you get them to grow to high levels in your water system, aerosols, showers, all that sort of stuff, If you get to be a high level in aerosols, you breathe it into your lungs and you get a lung disease. It's an illness very similar to kind of pneumonia symptoms. So you get high temperature, you get fever, you get headaches, you get fever. One thing which is quite interesting with regards to Legionella or Legionellosis, which is the medical term for it, is it's the cough. It's a non-productive cough. Usually, when I'm doing these sort of training sessions face to face, there's always someone at the back of the room that's really coughing quite badly. And it's like
Sorry,
kind of
Michael, I missed me cue.
yes, it's like kind of it's kind of no, it's a non-productive cough. So you'll cough and you cough and you cough, and there's nothing there. It's a different kind of cough. That's one of the symptoms. But like I say, it's asymptomatic, so you could have one of the symptoms or all of the symptoms. But yeah, it's not nice. Mortality rate is currently about 9%. So yeah, not great.
Where does the term Legionella or Legionellosis come from,
Yeah,
though?
it's a really good question. So it was back in 1976. It was in America, in Philadelphia. So they had a conference of old soldiers, so American soldiers that were called them Legionnaires. So the Legionnaires had a conference every year. 76 was quite an infamous one. They all got together. They're all kind of mature, middle-aged men sitting there drinking the whiskey, smoking the cigars. We would now that identify them as susceptible individuals, all getting together, and the air conditioning system wasn't as it should do. And basically these chaps, middle-aged men, whiskey drinking, cigar smoking, you basically got lungs full of it, and quite a few people died in that conference. So yes, in Philadelphia. So that was the Legionnaires conference, and it's called Legionella bacteria after that. Legionella pneumophila is the scientific name for it. Pneumo is obviously anything to do with lungs, and phila from Greek to like. So it's kind of literally as it sounds, it's a bacteria that likes the lungs of Legionnaires.
Okay.
There you go.
No worries. So what's the guidance or the regulations that are sort of that govern its kind of control and management?
So the high level, the kind of primal law for all this sort of stuff is a Health and Safety Work Act. I'm sure we're all employees. We all know that. So 1974 Health and Safety Work Act, that basically says in Section 2, you've got an overarching responsibility to your employees and visitors to come to your site. Okay. So Health and Safety Work Act 1974. So that's the primal law. However, from that, you have L8 ACOP, which is a guideline. People are saying, what's the law? It's not the law, it's a guideline. Okay, so that's the first thing. And that tells you, the L8 tells you how you control Legionella bacteria. And alongside L8 is HSG 274 Part 2. I always disappoint myself that it just rolls off my tongue. I've been saying it for so long, but it's been out a good 10 years now. So HSG 274 Part 2. If you haven't seen that or haven't got access to it, it's all free. hsc.gov.uk, as is L8. So please download that free. So it's a fantastic document.
I'll
And that
just
tells
put
you.
it in there, Michael, as well. Actually, on the
Yeah.
webinar, I've uploaded them onto the webinar. So if you go to the handout section on that drop-down box, you'll be able to download them direct from the webinar.
So if you think that L8 tells you how you do it, HSG 274 Part 2 tells you what you have to do, okay? So the hows, a very high level, again, it's not for today's presentation, but a very high level, L8 tells you that you have to have a management structure in place. So you have to have a duty holder at the top. The duty holder is the person ultimately, sounds a bit horrible, but would end up in court if something did go wrong. So as you start off, and must have all defined responsibilities in writing. Duty holder at the top, then responsible person, responsible people. Again, a 4-day training course. Responsible people tend to be those that have health and safety understanding, tend to have a good knowledge of water systems, quite organised people usually, and have a budget. Okay, like I say, usually the health and safety managers of the organisation. Under those can be deputy responsible people. Deputy responsible people, depending what industry you're in, could be scheme managers. If you're in a shelter accommodation, it could be branch managers. But yeah, they're basically they all feed into the top, which is a duty holder, and they must all manage. Part of the responsibility is you must manage your contractors. Potentially that's me. So that's part of your duty of care. And how do you know that your contractors are competent? That's one of the responsibilities of the duty holder and responsible person. Then you must, or part of the defence would be, to make sure that any of your contractors that you use are hired through the Legionella Control Association. So it's like they wouldn't like me saying like that, but it's like basically a trade body. Basically, every responsible Legionella contractor should be members of the LCA. We get audited once a year, and it's very, speaking from personal experience, it's a particularly stringent process. So they're on it. So yeah, so you use anybody through the LCA.
I suppose it's one of those things as well where if you contract with anybody, you can request their certificate and they will give you
Absolutely.
an in-date certificate. If they haven't got one, then you can check the website to make sure that they're on there.
Yep.
But really, they should be able to provide you with a certificate that's in date.
And if you're not sure, give them a call. They're very helpful people. Ours is sometimes a little bit hard to find because we're Northumbrian Water trading as on. We've got Essex and Suffolk Water and Tidal Water Solutions, so we can be a little bit hard to find those. So if in doubt, ask the contractor, can have a copy of it. A lot of them are now are in the back of their risk assessments. Ours will be shortly, or also just give them a call and they'll send it. There shouldn't be any issues with getting that. So yeah, that should be okay.
So when you were talking about controlling it, we're kind of mentioned a little bit at the beginning there around the sort of temperature and keeping it moving. So what are the things where would you start in the control of Legionella bacteria?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So running alongside the guidelines, which I say it's L8 and the HSG 274, L8 tells you basically how you have to do it. And one of the first things, apart from identifying a management structure, is you must identify the risk. Now, if you ever go to the health and safety executive presentations, they will always come out with a statement: you created the risk, therefore you need to manage it. Okay, you need to own this, as we say. So the idea is, how do you do that? Well, you have a risk assessment in place. So basically, yeah, risk assessment. It's you can do this yourself. If you've got simple properties and simple water systems. Definition of simple is anything without a shower, so we are limited, but you could do it yourself with a little bit of training, or the sales pitches, you get something like us to go and do them. But yes, risk assessment, identify the risk. So basically, that's quite an interesting process where we'll be unbiased, but basically you'd have technicians going to your site or sites. You would follow the water from where it rises in the rising supply, look at all your assets, so that would be storage systems, that would be calorifiers, point of use water treaters. Look at those, look at all your outlets, and basically see what risk that poses. An example could be a storage system, as I mentioned before, with that lid on it. It could be an old galvanized storage system where you're going to get zinc coming out of solution and basically being bacteria food again. It could be, and then look at all the outlets, so taps. They would look at areas such as first aid rooms, which can be a higher risk because they're not used. Remember what we said before about the mantra: keep it hot, keep it cold, keep it turning over. So if you've got a first aid room, quite often they're not used. When was last time used? Well, I'm using it for a couple of weeks. Fine, it becomes a higher risk. They'd look at all the outlets to make sure they are, say, being used, and look at the risk of aerosol generation. So if you're in industry, we're dealing a lot at the moment with painting facilities. So you get all that sort of stuff. So you get mists, you get all sorts of industrial sort of things, humidifiers and the rest of it, which can create an aerosol. So it's a matter of looking at the temperatures, looking at the turnover, looking at the source of nutrients, and basically, and temperature, turnover, nutrients, and the risk of the end user. So if you're in a care home, of course, and you've got higher, we've mentioned susceptible individuals. If you've got higher risk of susceptible individuals, then again there'll be an elevated risk. So basically, every outlet and every fitting is given a score. 10 is a low risk, 30 is a high risk. The postman's been, so the dog might start barking in a minute. So you've got a score of 10 for low risk and 30 for high risk. And basically add it all together, and you will get a risk for the building overall: high, medium, and low. And at the back of that risk assessment, there will be a list of recommendations which have to be completed to make sure that you're compliant. So it could be remedial works. It could be the case, I keep on going about the storage system without a lid on it, but it could be the case of put a lid on the storage system, give it a good clean out. So yeah, so that's a very, very high level, what basically the risk assessment process.
So the risk assessment's the first thing that you need to get. That's your playbook, I guess, for want of a better term, isn't it? It tells you exactly what you need to do to manage that risk going forward. So we do get people saying, we've had a couple of examples of people saying, "Oh, I've got a risk assessment." We're like, "Oh, great, when was it done?" It was like 2009. What's an acceptable time frame for a Legionella risk assessment? Because that's one of the questions we do get asked quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day before HSG 274 was revised in 2013, we got a lot of those questions. Back in the day, every risk assessment had to be done, reviewed every 2 years. That backstop was reviews, like I say, 10 years ago now. So there is no backstop in that respect. However, the whole intention of that statement was to increase the amount of time that these risk assessments were reviewed. So it was a minimum every 2 years, and people did them 2 years, whatever the risk. That's not what we're saying anymore. So if you've got higher risk property, higher risk building, then it should be reviewed more frequent than every 2 years. There are a list of criteria, A to J, I think they are. One of them would be change in management structure. It could be an outbreak or a risk of Legionella in the building, as in samples have become positive. It could be change the plumbing system. or just general concern, changing leadership. There's so many different ways that you could be triggered off a review of your risk assessment. But the thing what I get concerned about is people pay good money for these risk assessments and they get sat on the shelf. So the idea is that once you've had your risk assessment, review it. I do get quite not excited, that's not the right word, but I do get enthused when I do these training courses and I do speak to staff. I read your risk assessment, I've done it, and I'm aware of it, and it's really good. I think it's fantastic. Legionella control is not difficult, but it's about getting the staff engaged and getting them, taking them along the ride with them. So if you can get a risk assessment done properly, get it done well, get the staff to be aware of it, get them trained up and get them to read it and see what they have to do. It could be the case, which will probably lead us on to the next question, the control measures. Off the back of the risk assessment, there'll be a list of actions to do. So it could be remedial works, like you say. Dead legs are a nightmare. So if you can get your dead legs removed, we have lots of issues with dead legs, cap 10s. We've got one at the moment, a building that we're disinfecting. We've got dead legs that are probably tucked away in the suspended ceiling that we can't get to. So basically, when we're putting that chlorine down that pipe work, the chlorine is never going to get to the end of that dead leg. So you've got bacteria that's sat there stagnant for a long time. As soon as the chlorine's flushed out again, the bacteria are thinking, oh, happy days, here I am. And they'll be swimming out that pipe and be going infecting the rest of the system. That's an absolute nightmare. So whenever you see any dead legs, that'll be hopefully highlighted on your risk assessment if it's done properly. Then the whole T should be taken, removed, cut out on a straight fitting, put in, dead leg removed. So, like I said, there's no dead legs. There's no way of getting chlorine to the end of that pipe work. So they're a concern. But yeah, control measures highlighted in your risk assessment. It could be the case that you've got no management structure in place. Part of the L8, as we said, what we said at the beginning, how you do this, you must have a management structure in place. Is that being clearly defined with everybody's responsibilities? Training courses, have all your staff been trained? Sales pitch, we do those, but many other sales training providers out there, that's all possible. Make sure your staff are trained and know what they're doing, know their responsibilities. Control measures, we touched on those before. Temperature and turnover. Are your calorifiers storing water at over 60 degrees? Are they reaching the outlets at over 50 degrees? Are they? If you don't take the temperatures, you don't know. We touched on HSG 274 part 2 briefly before. There is a lovely table 2.1, gives you quite an exhaustive list as to what you have to do to comply with the guidelines, not the law, okay? So guidelines, so it could be water storage at hot over 60 degrees, come out the outlets at 50. And then your coals, what do you say? Keep it cold, and keep it hot. So your coals under 20 degrees from your cold outlet. Not always easy in the middle of summer. I heard we do have summers in the UK every now and again, but don't feel like it at the moment, does it? But yeah, so yeah, if you yeah, so basically cold should be under 20 degrees. Not always possible. Mains, I know down in Essex where I live, in the middle of August, you quite often get 24, 25 degrees out of your cold tap. There's absolutely nothing you can do about that. Seasonal variation, just keep the other control measures. As I said, keep it moving. So make sure you've got your turnover in place, keep on top of it. We're not going to start refrigerating reservoirs just yet. So yeah, just make sure that your turnover is high, so you keep the bacteria basically flushing the bacteria down the sink. All right, you're denying the bacteria the time to grow. Okay.
I think one of the things that you're talking about there, Michael, around the training is because a lot of the time what you'll tend to find is that the site owner will want to do the flushing because it's a weekly activity. Where if you're going to try and bring in a contract every week, the cost can be prohibitive, and it's something that's relatively simple to do and can be easily kind of taught. But it's the training behind the reason why you're doing it's the important part, because otherwise what you'll get somebody who goes, right, I need to go and flush this tap. They'll turn the tap on for 2 seconds and turn it off and go, there you go, the tap's flushed. And that's not the principle. The principle is to get the bacteria moving through the system so it doesn't have that ability to grow. And I think that's one of the things that does get missed. And some things certainly we have to kind of keep reiterating to customers, particularly if they're new to the subject.
Absolutely. I mean, flushing is, like I say, if I had one control measure, if I had the silver bullet, if for want of a better phrase, it would be turnover. It would be flushing. Okay. So we're seeing a lot. Well, we see a lot generally, but with sample failures, when we get a sample failure, the first thing we'll do, I'm banging on about temperature. That's a fantastic control measure, but its turnover is your friend. Okay, so first thing I would do when I ever see a high count is get it used, get it flushed. And it's a really good point that I've done so many training courses before where staff have said I'm not doing it because the bacteria levels are high in that pipe. We've acknowledged that, and you're asking me to flush it, create an aerosol, and basically putting me at risk. It's a sensible statement to make if you think about it. However, a little bit of training, you can do it quite safely. So we're banged on about aerosols. So the bacteria, every time you look at the shower, you see tiny little basically water droplets. Every single one of those water droplets could, underlined could, have bacteria inside it. Okay, hopefully it hasn't, but it's a matter of reducing those aerosols. How do you do that? Well, if it's a wash-hand basin, it's not too difficult. So basically turn your tap on slowly to start off with. Do your hot or your cold first, it's not a problem. So you can turn on slowly. So basically it's the first slug of water will always have the highest count of bacteria in every time. So you can turn that on slowly and let all that drain down the sink without splashing back off the wash-hand basin, off the porcelain. Do that slowly. And then once it's opened up and the water's down the drain, you can start opening up pretty much, increase the flow. The key point with I'd say the more modern way of flushing, shall we say, which is HSG 274, is that the idea is that the outlet temperature must reach the same temperature as your supplying asset. Now, certainly down in, what does that mean? So certainly down in Essex, where I live, where I'm living, is there's a big thing on pressure on water resources. Essex is drier than Israel, believe it or not, for water. So the idea is that we're supposed to be not flushing and wasting massive amounts of water. When I do these training sessions, everybody's handouts say, yeah, I flush it for 5, 7, 10 minutes. It's excessive, to say the least, in the majority of cases. So the idea is you to get a temperature probe. You can get a meat probe from online. They're not expensive, about 20 quid. Basically, take a temperature of the water. So if it's a cold, as soon as you turn the tap on, it might be even be 22, 23 degrees even in the winter, because you can get some transfer from the building. When you turn your tap on, follow that temperature till it drops to the supplying asset temperature and time it. So if you've got your mains coming at 8 degrees, today is probably about that. You turn your tap on, follow that from 22 to 8 degrees. It might be, I don't know, a minute or I don't know, 53 seconds. I'm just grasping numbers. Next time you go and do that, do exactly the same thing. Okay, so to flush that, you'll be surprised how fast it is once you get into the routine of flushing buildings. It doesn't have to be 4 or 5 minutes because you're wasting water. You don't need to do that. To flush it till it reaches a supplying asset temperature. If it's cold, that's fine. If it's a hot temperature, if you've got your calorifier at hopefully it's 60 degrees, then make sure you're flushing your outlet, so your hot outlet till it reaches 60 degrees, and that should be it'll be different depending on where it is in the building. If it's further away from the calorifier, the longer it will take. Okay, so if it's near, if it's a sentinel, remember sentinel is nearest and furthest. If it's a sentinel in the bathroom, my sentinel in my bathroom upstairs it'll do it in less than 2 seconds. It was straight through. But yeah, the down in the kitchen might take, I don't know, a minute. So it's just about knowing your building and knowing your water systems. So just to reiterate, it's supplying asset temperature, and that was it's nicely talked about in HSG 274 how to flush correctly. So and LA goes into some details all about control measures. So that's the sort of thing that you need to be aware of. So can't reiterate that enough. If you do it properly, you save yourself a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of water, and you should have bacteria friendly water systems, or unfriendly systems, I should say. Get it all flushed out down the drain.
I was going to say, yeah, because it is one. Obviously, we work for a water company as well, so obviously we're quite invested in saving water usage, and rightly so. It's precious resource that we need to look after. I suppose one of the other things that we sometimes get is we find that there's assets that are in buildings that never get used, and then they're flushing them to manage the level of bacteria. So we can get it where, maybe back in the day at the factory, everybody rode in on bikes and they had 15 showers, and now there's like 3 people who actually use the showers on a morning. It's like, well, then take out 12 of the showers and you've mitigated your risk, and you're not then having to flush it, and you're saving money on water as well as not having to manage that asset as well. And that's something that I think is underestimated, how powerful it can be on a savings point of view.
Absolutely. I mean, you've made a few good points there. I mean, the other thing to think about as well is I know we're still a little bit of COVID times, but the idea is that building use is dynamic. People forget that. So you get a risk assessment, and the risk assessor should identify the little used outlets and identify it in the logbook and the risk assessment. However, that might change. It might be the case that you've got the I don't know, the tool shed that's used all the time, and then suddenly you start doing something else. You start making other equipment, you don't use that anymore. So in which case that's no longer used. So that needs to be added to the flushing log. Just because you didn't see it on the time when you did the risk assessment doesn't mean say that's going to be the same for up to 2 years, however long that risk assessment stays in place. So it's down to your kind of responsible person on site to identify the little used outlets. And remember, we're talking about little used outlets. I think you've already mentioned that, Andy, before. It's any outlet that's not used within a week, unless it's healthcare. Healthcare is twice a week, okay? So yes, so flushing basically, it's anything that's not used in a week. And if you at home, don't forget the bacteria don't know when to stop growing. They'll grow at home as well. So if you're fortunate enough to live in a large house that you've got a utility room that doesn't get used, or a spare ensuite, or I'll talk about my kids. My daughters are teenagers now, but when we first moved in here, they had an ensuite and they never used it because you couldn't get young children into showers. So I physically, it's sad, but I used to flush it myself. Now the teenagers, you can't get them out of the shower. So again, building use changes. So that's something to think about. But yeah, get it used. And the other mantra as well, as we've said before, keep it hot, keep it cold, keep it moving. Also, if you're not signing them against it, you've not done it.
It hasn't been done. Exactly.
Hasn't been done. So your risk assessment should have a flushing log at the back. And again, dynamic, so it's not always going to be the print room or wherever it is, or the first aid room, because you might have older people, I don't know, but building use will change over time, okay? So the idea is that keep on top of it, flush it, your flushing log, and if you want to be cheeky, you can email us. I don't mind, absolutely fine. I can share our flushing logs with the latest format on there. I'm happy to share that with you, or maybe you can even put that on, Andrew, make that available to people. But yeah, if
I'll
you
send it to everybody afterwards.
Yeah, they can have that, so you can use that. You fill your name in there, start temperature, end temperature, duration of flush, signature on there. Happy days. Then you should be compliant. One thing that, you know, if you did ever fall foul, and HSE did give you a knock on the door, they would be looking at your risk assessments and they would be looking at your flushing logs to make sure that you're on top of your buildings. It's just a demonstration of competence, really, that you know what you're doing.
I suppose when it comes to identifying those little used outlets as well, when you're saying obviously sort of it needs to be flushed once a week, or at least once a week or twice a week if it's in healthcare, is there's technology now available on the marketplace that wasn't really there probably certainly 3-4 years ago. It wasn't even really, I don't think there was any of it really out there. I mean, we've got one now where effectively what it does is it automatically monitors the temperature aspect of it. But the additional benefits are that you can sit in front of a laptop like I'm doing right now with a screen which is looking at all of your assets, what temperatures they're getting to, are they getting to the cold, are they getting to the hot, but then also you'll be able to tell ones that haven't been used because the temperature will just be flatlined across it, at which point you can then identify. And I think that's probably the new way that things are happening as far as sort of Legionella's going. And you know, we've had some great feedback from customers on that as well. We've actually got another webinar already up on the website around remote temperature sensing, so it'd be well worth having a look at that, particularly if you're managing a large portfolio of different sites around.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah, it's the way. Sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, no, absolutely, and that is the way. That's the way we're going. Let's say we did a lot of remote temperature sensing. That's becoming more popular. It's doing really well at the moment. And you're absolutely right. The days of driving around manually taking temperatures, it's not particularly environmentally friendly. Drive putting vans around the country to do that. But yeah, you can do that. A temperature every 3 hours at the moment is what we're doing. Absolutely brilliant way of doing it. And the other thing which always makes me smile was the first trial we ever did. It was quite a while ago now. Was the chap on reception? Yeah, I flush all that. The first aid road. Yeah, I'm flushing it all the time. But giving it a good old flush. Yeah, you flushed it for, I think we counted 17 seconds one time he flushed it. Yeah, we did. So I don't must be the flushing police, but he didn't flush it till it didn't, you could see it didn't flatline at kind of the main temperature or supplying asset temperature. It just didn't. So you're not doing your job properly. And this is where a lot of issues we have is we go to site as technicians and risk assessors and management, you go to say, oh yeah, this is all flushed. There's scale everywhere. The trap's dried up. You're not flushing it whatsoever. You say you're flushing it, but you're not. And I think this is a key thing about just being open and say, look, you know, you've got to flush it for the right amount of time. Otherwise, you know, you're going to have problems and issues we've had in the past. And certainly we've got 1 or 2 sites at the moment. Once Legionella bacteria get hold, they're a hell of a job to get rid of. We're basically going through a program at the moment. It's throwing out pretty new electric showers. We've shown that we can't. It's very, very difficult to basically clean and disinfect in the internal gubbins of an electric shower because of the way the heat exchange is manufactured. There's so many nooks and crannies in there. Once bacteria get hold of it, you get biofilms and all sorts of stuff, little bits of sediment in there. You're never going to get the bacteria. You're never going to get them out. So we are just they're almost new. We're throwing them away and starting again simply because of a lockdown that we never use and never flush. And it's really quite, you know, it's sad really. So it's just a matter of keeping on top of your water systems and identifying little used outlets and being really proactive with it and cracking on and getting them flushed.
I suppose that brings us probably full circle around to the kind of that's the reason why you need people to understand the reason that they're doing it. Because if it's just like, oh well, I've just got to do that and I can do it for 17 seconds and that's good enough, that's where the problems lie. Whereas if they knew the reason that we're doing it is because the bacteria will grow and, you know, once it's in there we can't get it out, and, you know, there's going to be cost implications, things that people take it a bit more seriously and move on. So that's great. We haven't had any questions come through as of yet, so I can only assume that Michael and I have been answering it well. If there's any questions, if this isn't the place you want to ask it, that's fine. What I'll do is we've got a free Legionella health check that we do, so you can ring our 0800 number, which is 0800 028 3557. On there, if you go to option 3, that's Legionella, and if you're based in the north, I think it's option 1. If you're in the south, option 2. You'll get through to either Sarah, Sally, or possibly Mel, and you can have a chat with them about where you're up to, what you're doing, and they'll talk you through the whole process of what you should have in place. Do a little bit of sort of kind of gap analysis for you there. It's all free, and then we can tell you how you can get on top of your Legionella control. And if you're still watching this video, I'll put a slide on the back end of it once I've edited it. So I think that probably brings us to an end. So I'd just like to say a big thank you for spending some time with us today. We hope you found it useful, and we hope to see you at some point in the future, hopefully. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, and goodbye. Thank you. Bye-bye.